We are live. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming out on a Sunday afternoon, taking some time to hear about autonomous vehicles. We've got a panel for you today entitled Autonomous Vehicles Are Here, but Are We Ready? My name is Ian Adams. I'm a fellow with the R Street Institute, which is a think tank in Washington, D.C., but when I'm not a fellow, I am an associate with the public policy group of a law firm named Haroon and Sasha. And so the people you want to hear from, one is to my right. His name is the Honorable David Strickland. He is a partner at a national law firm named Venable and is the former 14th administrator of the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. That's NHTSA for short. We're going to hear that a lot during this panel. During his tenure, which was prolific, he issued the first statement of policy regarding the testing of automated vehicles on public roads. Prior to NHTSA, Mr. Strickland served as senior counsel to the U.S. Senate Commerce Committee, where he was responsible for the staff oversight of the Federal Trade Commission, the Consumer Product Safety Commission, and NHTSA. David holds degrees from Northwestern for undergrad and a JD from Harvard Law School. To my left, we have Jennifer Haroon. She is the head of business for self-driving cars at Google X, where she leads strategic initiatives, business operations, and partnerships. And before that, Jennifer previously launched Project Link, which was a wholesale metro fiber network in 2 African cities. Before her time at Google, she was a project leader at Boston Consulting Group and an associate in equity research with the Thomas Weisel Partners. Jennifer holds a BS from Duke and an MBA from UC Berkeley. And at the very end, we have Sasha Moss, who is policy counsel for Representative Blake Farenthold, Republican Texas, who sits on the U.S. House Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure. Previously, she assisted the government affairs team at Caterpillar doing domestic patent policy, and she's received her law degree from the University of Glasgow and an LLM from George Washington University School of Law. She also has, and this is interesting, a master's in Victorian literature and a BA in English literature, both of which should figure prominently today.
Definitely.
Before we dive into details, oh, look at that, we're already behind. Before we dive into the details of the policy here, I was hoping David, who is sitting to my right, who is the former NHTSA administrator, could take us through the different kinds of autonomous vehicles there are and the ways that they're classified.
Certainly, very happy to, and good afternoon. And there's glad to see everyone at the 5 to 6 p.m. panel. We are in between, education and happy hour, so we'll keep this crisp. The levels that NHTSA has delineated when we issued the statement of policy in 2013 actually goes from level 0 to level 4. Level 0, let's think about it as a vehicle with virtually no notion of active safety. It is your 1968 Mustang that Steve McQueen drove in Bullet. It is literally linkages and wires and nothing else that actually controls. Level 1 is frankly the most sort of basic level of when you're talking about electronic interaction. You're thinking about electronic stability control, things that are frankly passive and invisible to the driver, but are in the background to intervene in case the driver gets in a problem. Electronic ESC is electronic stability control, which takes over for braking to help with prevent a rollover crash. Level 2 is basically what you see in higher model vehicles today. It is a combination of active safety systems like crash imminent braking. And I'm sure you've seen the commercials where the vehicle approaches somebody and not paying attention, it stops itself. Or lane keeping assist systems where the vehicle can see the lines of the road and maintain in between those 2 lanes, and blind spots and things of that nature. These things where frankly, if you put them all together, if you knit them together, they will frankly get you 3/4 of a way to a self-driving vehicle. Level 3. This is a vehicle where I think where people are sort of beginning to really look at what the expectations are for self-driving. That is a vehicle that is expected to be able to fully maintain all aspects of the drive for part of the time, but there is an expectation the vehicle will hand back control to the driver in situations that it doesn't understand, or areas that it hasn't mapped, or frankly areas that may even be prohibited to allow self-driving. You can maybe see at some point in the future where self-driving is allowed in these areas, but if you're in a very heavy pedestrian setting, they may ask for the vehicle to automatically hand back to the driver. I have issues with that personally, but that's an aspect of it. Level 4 of the NHTSA system is fully autonomous driving. I don't like to use the word autonomous to describe the whole system. It's really everything else is automated because there's levels of the driver may be expecting for people to drive. The level 4 is a notion where there is zero expectation of any human interaction with the vehicle. It is you get in, you bump yourself up, the vehicle knows where you want to go, or you tell the vehicle where you want to go, and it takes care of every aspect of the drive, and there's no notion of handback. So those are the 4 levels, and back in.
Yeah, perfect. Well, now that we have a sense of exactly what this is, and we understand that you have to differentiate between varieties of autonomous vehicles, I'm going to kick things off by asking just a couple of yes-no questions so that we can situate where we are with these various policy discussions. So I turn to Jennifer and I ask, can Google accomplish its autonomous vehicle goals under California's proposed regulations, which currently prohibit vehicles without a steering wheel?
Yeah, so given the California draft regulations, no, we can't. Now they are draft regulations, so we are very hopeful that I can change that answer to yes.
All right, Sasha, does Congress have a role to play in the adoption of autonomous vehicles?
It's a hard question to say with a yes or no, because point blank, I know I'm throwing you off. Basically, Congress is purely reactionary. If there's something in the news, Congress will react to it and go from there. So in its role as a whole, yes, it needs to be served properly, but presently I think we're just here to listen and not necessarily legislate at this time. So sorry about that.
And David, yes or no?
Yes or no?
Yeah, yes or no? Can the states, as opposed to the federal government, serve as competent regulators of autonomous vehicles?
Oh, that's loaded. You can't get me to go yes or no.
All right, then a sentence.
Okay, yes. They have a significant role to play because they control the police power in terms of regulating licensing. So they have a role, but they don't have a role in terms of issuing things that are equivalent to federal motor vehicle safety standards, which is NHTSA's territory.
Okay, all right. So it sounds like at the moment, the law isn't necessarily in its current form ready for wholesale adoption of autonomous vehicles, so things are going to need to change. Policymakers are going to need to do something. So then I turn back to you, Sasha. Next week, Congress is going to hold a hearing on autonomous vehicles. And so what role do you think Congress can play? What role should it play? And what role will it actually play?
To break it down, I'm going to reiterate what I said earlier. Congress's role is to listen. Right now, we have legislators who do know tech policy. My boss, for example, Congressman Blake Farenthold. He knows this policy backwards, forwards, front ways, sideways. He spoke at South by on Friday. Some of you Representative Issa, Representative Lofgren, Del Bene, on judiciary who know what's going on and understand the need to evolve. We are presently using autonomous technology in vehicles. We don't just know, parking or sensors and things of that sort. So where we're going in the future and hearing on Tuesday, I'm really hoping that senators will be able to understand that they can't go in saying, well, this happened with Google last month, which I'm not going to speak about, but after the bus. They're not going to talk about how AAA, for example, had a survey of 75% of the public are weary of autonomous vehicles. And that's a really scary thing, and they work for their constituents. That said, we need to take a step back. We need to look at a proactive point of view and maybe get past the gray clouds and the darkness sometimes when it comes to new technology. And circling back regarding Tuesday, I think just listen, don't come out with knee-jerk statements, knee-jerk legislation. Take it time like a school. Let people who work on this every day, like many of us in the crowd, handle it for themselves, and then report back, and then we can find a way for the federal government to get involved.
Okay. Well, let's hope they do.
Thank you.
And so then, Jennifer, please explain the California regulations, if you would, as they currently stand, and the direction that you'd like to see them move, or that you're hopeful they will move.
Yeah, I think that the challenge is that we've seen a lot of enthusiasm for self-driving technology from cities, states, countries, which is fantastic. And sometimes that enthusiasm has led to legislation. In the last 2 years, legislative suggestions, in the last 2 years, something like 23 states have introduced 53 pieces of legislation that would impact autonomous vehicles. But each one of those has its own concepts, it has different approaches. And so you can imagine in the future, if states do it their own way, it would be difficult, for example, to operate an autonomous vehicle across state lines. So in the case of California, one aspect of their draft regulation is that they require there to be a licensed driver in a fully autonomous vehicle. Now, we're working on a fully autonomous vehicle because we really think there are so many benefits from people being able to go from point A to point B at the touch of a button, right? Whether that's safety benefits, whether it's accessibility to those who can't drive today. And so if you require a licensed driver in the car, you aren't getting all those benefits.
And so, David, I then turn to you, because Jennifer's just outlined part of the problem with having all of the states jump in. And yet you say that states do have something of a role to play. How are we going to write that question?
It's going to be hard, and I'm not going to lie. Companies have dealt with differing state legislative foundations and other industries. Privacy in general is a great one. There's almost a different set of privacy rules for breach in every state in the union and the territories, but we still have managed and actually an internet that is actually able to deal with interstate commerce. So it isn't impossible. But having a patchwork of laws across the states is going to slow deployment of these vehicles, and it's going to increase cost. So I think the goal is, I know the Department of Transportation has issued its plan to, over the next 6 months, to deal with a number of regulatory hurdles, including how they can work with the states to create model legislation so that we don't have a patchwork and we have, frankly, similar, it's almost impossible to get exactly right when everybody's acting independently, but similar set of laws regarding self-driving vehicles, so it makes it easier for deployment. Because this is the one thing that everybody talks about. There's a Kelly Blue Book study that they released at the RSA conference in San Francisco a few weeks back, where there's about 65% or so folks that are not bullish on self-driving technology. They're actually afraid of it. But when you have approximately 33,000 people a year die on the roads due to crashes, where human beings, frankly, there's an element of error in 94% in all crashes that ever happen. Self-driving vehicles in that deployment has an opportunity for us to drive that number towards zero. And the sooner that we can get those vehicles on the road, the more people, the more families we can save, which is the reason why I think everybody here on this panel is so bullish on the technology, not because of the ease and convenience, but really our opportunities to make a difference and save lives.
Well, so then how, in light of the fact that 65, 70% of the public are a little concerned about autonomous vehicles, Jennifer, I wonder, how do you handle public perception? How do you make them comfortable with the technology, particularly in light of some of the mishaps that have occurred?
Sure. I mean, let me address the bus incident that most of you have probably read about directly. So, as I mentioned, one of the reasons Google started the self-driving car project was to address safety, exactly what David just mentioned. It's amazing that last year, 38,000 people died on U.S. roads. That's actually an increase. That's the wrong direction. We're headed in the wrong direction. In our 1.4 million miles of autonomous driving, this was the first time where one of our vehicles bumped into something else. That's obviously not what we want to happen. And in this case, what happened was our vehicle was in one of those wide right lanes that you sometimes experience. And we had recently taught our vehicles to hug the right-hand side of that lane when it wants to make a right turn, because that's what a lot of people do. That makes room for those on the left-hand side of that same lane to wait to go straight. Our vehicle approached some sandbags on the road and decided it didn't want to run over them, and so it was waiting for traffic so it could nudge around them. It saw the bus, it saw the gap in the traffic, and it predicted that the bus would allow some room and yield to it. That was incorrect. The bus didn't do that. And so it then hit the side of the bus at 2 miles per hour. Yeah. So, that is a tough day. It's a tough day for our team, for sure. But it was also an important learning. And, we've made thousands of changes since that. And I think it's important to keep in mind that human drivers have that kind of misunderstanding every day.
Sure.
And exactly as David said, 94% of crashes, many of which are more than at 2 miles per hour, are due to human error. And so we can't, we have to keep that in light as we're developing technology like this.
Well, so I suppose then the question is for regulators, and certainly as a manufacturer, how safe is safe enough? Because you're coming from a place where 33,000 or more, it sounds like, people are being killed on the roads every year, and how many more are being injured. So what should be the target for manufacturers? What should be the target for regulators? And I throw that out to any of you. I'm sure you all have thoughts.
Well, I'll defer to the side of the table, and I'll
I mean, for us, our goal is to create self-driving technology that is better than human drivers. Again, it's to bring down that 94% of crashes that are due to human error.
And again, I have to I'm coming from, as a Hill staffer, I'm a Hill staffer, and the problem is, well, this is all well and good. I'm very much in favor of autonomous vehicles being brought onto the road. I just always get worried when we get Congress involved, and we had the bus story, for example. That was all over. We've seen speaking of privacy, not specifically to this, the encryption debate. One thing happened, and Congress went nuts. And if you say encryption 3 times, I do turn into a pumpkin now. So I'm always a little bit afraid on the regulatory side and the broader story, 30,000 feet level. I'm not necessarily answering the question specifically. This side of the table is a little bit weary of getting further involved immediately, because it's always kind of worrisome when you have, congressmen who don't necessarily understand the issues and react, and I'm not concerned by sometimes.
So David, how
Sure.
safe is safe enough?
It's about consumer acceptance.
Okay.
And when you think about, in the automobile industry, this is an industry that's over 100 years old. And when you think about the notions of safety and actually all the notions of being Six Sigma, which is basically being 99.9999%, what your operation is happens exactly what you want to every single time. So that's the safety quotient. Now you have 95 or 94% human error number over here. So even if a self-driving vehicle was 85% better, and that's a huge deal in terms of safety, it will be unacceptable for a consumer to say that there is a 15% chance that your vehicle will make an error which will cause a crash. No one would buy it. So what you're thinking about is safe enough isn't about the question of the regulator, which comes to NHTSA. I'll talk about a legal construct, but for there to be consumer acceptance of these vehicles, they have to be virtually perfect in how they manage the driving task in order for consumers to truly buy them. Beyond the first adopters and beyond the convenience and everything else, the fact that that you can put your grandmother who isn't able to drive in that vehicle and know that she can get to her doctor's appointment safely. Or you can put your 15-year-old kid that has 5 a.m. swim practice in the car and you know that they will get there safely. That's what you're selling. Now, on the flip side, and on the regulatory standpoint, NHTSA has an overall defect investigation underpinning, which relies on things that pose an unreasonable risk to safety. And that's a little fuzzy. But basically what that means is if you have a product of a car or a piece of motor vehicle equipment that's on the road, and it does something that is anomalous to what the rest of the entire fleet does, NHTSA considered that a defect, and then they can do an investigation and then ultimately force a recall. So that's what the legal underpinning would be dealing with in self-driving vehicles that are deployed on the road pre-motor vehicle safety standard. So NHTSA, it isn't a 99% has to be perfect. It has to be a comparison to the rest of the fleet, which is a much softer standard. But going back again, for Google and everybody else in the industry, for them to be able to sell this vehicle, they're going to have to be able to say, we are beyond human frailty. We are basically perfect. And which is the reason why Google and so many others have invested so many millions of miles of testing and research in order to be able to get to that point.
Well, and I think that customer acceptance point is really interesting, David, because we also feel that that's really important. And one of the reasons we've started to expand our testing to other cities, like here in Austin and also Kirkland, Washington, is because in 7 years of working on self-driving cars, we have primarily been driving in Mountain View, our hometown. And in some ways, our community members had been used to seeing our cars around. It's sort of like, oh, there goes another Google self-driving car. And one of the things we wanted to learn was, what about when new communities get this new technology in their neighborhoods? What does that mean? And all of our vehicles have a URL on the back of them, so the community members can write back to us and tell us how they felt with the self-driving car near them or how they want to use them. And we also find when people get in one of our self-driving cars, they're really surprised, kind of around 3 things. So one, we often hear that people are surprised about how boring it is. and to me, that's good. I actually don't want to make it overly exciting. 2, they're surprised by how much the car can see. Because the self-driving car has a 360-degree view at all times out to 2 football fields. Now, even with all the mirrors you have in your car, you know, I don't know about you, but my head doesn't spin around, so I don't have that view at all times. And the last thing they're surprised by is how quickly they trust the technology. So once it does exactly what they expect to do, and sometimes even more because it sees more, they quickly trust it. So we definitely work on and think about customer acceptance, and I agree with David that that's very important.
So then, moving forward, what are some of the other technical hurdles that manufacturers are going to have to deal with as they move forward with rolling out more sophisticated self-driving vehicles?
Yeah, for us, we don't really believe that there are technical hurdles that are not insurmountable. That being said, we think about rolling out self-driving technology in some ways similar to how, you know, you learn to drive, right, when you got your license. So, you know, when I got my license at 16 and when other people do, your parents probably don't let you just go out and drive anywhere, anytime you want. I think our 16-year-old selves all want that, but that's not really how it was. And so we can imagine the way that we've tested our cars would be similar to how we roll it out, is that, you know, we tested our cars first on highways, which are much simpler environments. You know, hopefully the cars are heading in the same direction, the directions are divided, you know, then onto boulevards and onto city streets, and even then to neighborhoods. And so you might imagine the rollout of self-driving technology to follow a similar incremental complexity.
So then, what would, moving forward, the ideal regulatory system for autonomous vehicles look like? You could just start anew. What would you be trying to accomplish?
Well, the problem is you can't start anew because we have a set of over 60 federal motor vehicle safety standards which have incumbencies which, as they're written, you can't just simply wipe them away. So you basically have to build a vehicle at this point in time, unless there is a regulatory or a legislative change, that basically the cars you see today will have the same components on them with a self-driving component, which I think is inefficient and problematic. In several ways, I think Google and others have talked about the inefficiencies and, frankly, the safety cases of why you shouldn't do that, but they're dealing with that right now. But basically, what I would probably say, if I had to blank slate, if I was, well, even if I was an administrator, I don't have this power. But if you want to sort of blank slate, you would frankly create almost a separate regulatory track for self-driving and automation versus a human-driven machine that is on the roads right now. I think that, frankly, that pathway, you know, that way you can take a number of those assumptions that you have for safety, human-machine interface, comfort, reliability, redundant systems that you need in a vehicle that a human being that has a 94% chance of being a part of a crash, as per the statistics, versus a self-driving vehicle which has an entire different, you know, set of, frankly, of not only artificial intelligence, but how it's designed and how it's made with no expectation of human interaction. You can, you know, you can actually remove systems from the vehicle which will reduce weight, which will reduce complexity, and frankly increase safety, while the same, and improve congestion issues, but they're different. And so if you're going to do that, that will be, if I had to rule the world and make it, that's probably the easy way to do it.
Huh. And so, Sasha, I turn to you now. Your boss is known as something of, what is it, an encryption absolutist?
That's a new term I've heard throwing around. We did have tote bags today, Johnson and I wrote that on, possibly.
So there are detractors out there that say that autonomous vehicles present difficulty for those of us that value our privacy. I wonder what you think about that. Is this going to be a problem?
That's going to be a massive problem. It's the Internet of Things finally coming upon us. And again, don't say encryption two more times or I will turn into a pumpkin. And it's a scary, scary thing for a lot of people. And the Internet of Things need to embrace it. Presently, I think in most vehicles, they have some form of autonomous technology already integrated, as mentioned earlier. Now, trying to translate that to how we bridge that a little bit further and how people learn to accept it and want it and desire it after obviously testing out the vehicles and find out they actually really enjoy and trust this. And the Internet of Things kind of poses that weird question of how can my toaster be connected to, I don't know, my car, things of that sort, and who owns what. So the idea of ownership, security, how the patches are going to be instilled upon, like how does that work? And there are holes right now in the law when it comes to these ownership issues, which are quite terrifying. What if you can't do system patch? Then you're vulnerable. And if you're vulnerable and connected one out of the view, you're connected to another in your house, your cell phone, your car, for example, and it is a major concern. I think privacy advocates and civil liberties individuals have done a really fantastic job with pointing this out. Like, it's all well and good to talk about, you know, how the vehicle's going to operate, what is it, but now back it up to what's going to happen to my stuff, what's going to happen to my bank account if there's a hole.
Actually, yeah.
Please, go ahead.
No, Sasha, I'm with you. And actually, I'm going to have a moment of sharing. I purchased a new vehicle last Saturday. Now, I've seen it for only one day because I bought the vehicle and got on a plane, and now I'm kind of here.
What color is it?
It's silver.
Oh.
But it's a plug-in hybrid. And as part of the telematics package to run a plug-in hybrid, I basically, in the dealership, you sign a bunch of waivers, you know, they beat you up in finance and all this other stuff. But they're now giving you, you know, privacy disclosure statements that you have to sign. And being an attorney that actually has worked on privacy issues for over 15 years, and the person who was the head of auto safety for the United States for 4, I kind of know more than the average person. So I actually read this stuff. And basically it was a contract of adhesion. It's either you will give up your data so that your vehicle will be fully optimized to use a telematics suite to do all the wonderful things that you're paying for to do, or you can decline it and nothing will work.
So it's called going full yellow, I think?
Yeah, exactly right. And so, what's your choice after you purchase a new vehicle that's a plug-in hybrid? You need to find electric charging stations. You need to find all this other stuff. I want to be able to use my the curated app suite, so all the things you want to be able to do with the vehicle. I sign my data away. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I am a data slut. But that's exactly the point that Sasha's talking about, is that how do we empower people going forward so that you don't have this binary contract of adhesion when you're making a purchase of the Internet of Things. And we're not there yet, and hopefully we evolve there. But I know the one part that in the automobile industry that they have done is they actually set forth a set of principles, the privacy principles, which are foundationally helpful, and frankly I think it's the first in the Internet of Things. It doesn't solve everything, but it answers a lot of things in terms of providing affirmative consent, protecting sensitive data such as biometrics and geolocation and driving behavior. But it's these types of things I think Sasha made an excellent point in making when you think about self-driving vehicles, which are going to be able, they're going to, by the necessity of their operation, they're going to have to collect a lot of data. And how do we manage that? And I'm sure there's a lot of companies that realize this, and they're going to be very thoughtful in how they create that relationship. But Sasha made a very great point. It's hard, and I think a lot of people are a little nervous about it. And some people aren't as easy as I am in giving up their life story in order to be able to make sure you can find a plug-in.
So I wonder, Jennifer, do you know any companies that are being thoughtful about this? And could you speak to what they're doing?
Well, we started to think about it in a couple of ways. One is around security. And so we get asked a lot about car hacking, for example, after some other vehicles have been hacked. And at Google, you know, we have a lot of internet products. And as a company, we think about security and handle it very carefully. And so our team uses the same security experts that we have internally at Google to think about security for our car. What's an additional important point is that on our vehicles, every safety decision, therefore driving decision, is made on the vehicle. It's not reliant on some other types of autonomous vehicle technology like V2X. So it doesn't require a connection to the internet to make those safety decisions, and that was part of a security decision. In terms of privacy, you're very right. I mean, it's important for us as being part of communities to think about how people view that. And our data is used in order to make our self-driving cars better.
So then I'd like to turn to another issue that self-driving cars are going to change dramatically, and that is, I'm sure you all see a massive amount of advertising for automobile insurance. Will I still see that huge amount of advertising when level 3 and potentially level 4 cars are rolled out, David? How will liability change?
It also sort of depends on how, frankly, this is going to have to be something that's going to be worked out at one level of the courts. I mean, it's going to happen when you're going to have a self-driving vehicle involved in a crash, and if there is truly a question of who is at fault. You know, in the case of the bus crash, you know, Google's like, no, this was our system. There was no question of liability. We're the ones that were at fault. Boom, you're done. But there is going to be a crash one day where there's going to be either the other automated vehicle, or it's going to be a human being that says, I was in the right, and then there's going to be an automated vehicle that's being driven. It's like, okay, it did what it's supposed to do. The one thing that would be easy is you can definitely pull down the telematics and the event data recorder, or the event data recorder max that's probably going to be involved in self-driving. That can definitely show what happened in real time throughout the crash. But right now, until there's likely not going to be a change in law unless the Congress or states make a decision in financial responsibility laws, which is ultimately what insurance is regulated by. Who's responsible for paying when there's something that happens at fault? That at this level, the owner of the car is still the financially responsible partner in the transaction, and as we see it right now, that's not going to change. Now, what happens is it's going to be subrogation of liability. Now, the answer is going to be, if I purchase a self-driving vehicle from Strickland Motors, then I'll look, I was sitting in the back, I had nothing to do with it, I wasn't driving, you know? It's like the vehicle did it, and it's going to be Strickland Motors will step in, the insurance company will say, okay, well, you're a self-driving vehicle, so you now have to subrogate whatever issues there are, and they're going to have to fight it out. Now, that's going to be very inefficient. That's probably going to be the foundation of what we see. There will eventually be probably some restructuring in the insurance industry and the financial responsibility laws, which are frankly also the responsibility of the states, not the federal government. And as you sort of think about these things, but there's going to be those few test cases of how this thing works out. It'll be dealt with in contract and things of that nature as well. But you know, I don't think it's some scary revelation that's going to happen. Like, oh my God, what are we going to do if a self-driving car gets into a crash? I think there's a foundation of hundreds of years of law that still apply to the same scenarios.
So, Jennifer, do you think that there's going to be a financial responsibility revolution? What's Google's thought on this? How do they approach it? Because I know the California testing regs have all kinds of financial responsibility provisions in them. What would you like to see moving forward in the actual the rollout rates?
Well, I think David is right. I mean, self-driving technology is not the only new technology that we've seen over the last hundreds of years, and our legal system and our courts have continued to deal with new technology over the years, and so I think that system is going to continue to work. And he's also right that if there were a court case, one of the benefits of self-driving cars is it does have a lot of data around that incident, and so it could make it easier to determine liability. And if you have a fully self-driving car where a passenger is a passenger, then that passenger can't be liable, right? It's the car, and therefore who makes that car.
So then and this is for everyone, in the next 5, 10, 20 years, just if you could give me your sense of where this technology will go and what the best case scenario is. Why should we be optimistic about this technology moving forward?
I'm happy to start. So, I mean, I think some of the points about the benefits of self-driving vehicles have been made, right? One is around safety. A big one that's important to us is around accessibility. There are lots of people that can't drive today, and it's hard for most of us here who do drive to imagine, well, I need to go get some milk up in the car. I want to go see a friend, hop in the car. You know, a lot of us have that freedom and independence that a population of our citizens don't have. And then, of course, there are potential environmental and cityscape benefits that a lot of cities have been considering, which I think is great. So if I think about the next 5 years, I do think that self-driving cars will be available, again, in an incremental way, right? It won't be ubiquitous and everywhere. And I think that having people able to use them and benefit from all of those things really benefits everyone. I feel like we really are in it together, whether it's cities, states, Congress, and all of us in seeing self-driving cars come to fruition.
I agree. I'm going to harp back to getting, I feel like a broken record right now. It's the education of our legislators and also the public. And once we can get the message kind of rolled out that this is a really good thing and everyone should be able to enjoy the technology and know that they're already using it in certain ways, it'll make the long-term message and whatever's happening down the line a lot smoother and easier. And if we just continue on that route, which I think everyone's done a pretty great job of so far, we should have them on the road eventually and embrace them.
I hope so. David?
I have nothing to add. I think really the issue is we have been stair-stepping with active safety systems, which people are getting more comfortable with. Crash event braking systems, lane keeping systems, blind spot systems, backup cameras, something I'm really passionate about. Even with backup cameras being matched with cross-traffic alert, so that you actually get your vehicle sees as you're backing up and you're in between two huge ginormous SUVs and you can't see as you're pulling out, your vehicle can. We are experiencing elements of automation already. They just haven't talked about it. And circle back to my comment, which I really am passionate about. The promise in automation and self-driving is crash reduction and life saving. Beyond all the other benefits of freedom and convenience, it's really having that vector where we've been. We used to, back in the early 60s, mid-60s, before NHTSA existed, there was way fewer miles traveled every year and a way smaller population with 50,000 people a year dying. So the numbers don't look that big in absolute, from 50,000 to 32, 33, and even though they're going up a little some this year. But the amount that we drive, the number of people we have, we've made huge strides in safety. But we've kind of been living in a steady state existence, and we're having significant but gradual decreases over the years. Automation has the opportunity for us in the United States to really talk about what a number of states have talked about in Africa for years, about having no one dying on the road because of a traffic crash. And when you're having as many people dying every year, you think about traffic crashes compared to other systemic diseases in public health. Traffic crashes are consistently the top 10 killers of everyone in America. So that's the reason why, personally, why I think it's so important for us to succeed in the policy issues and consumer acceptance issues, so that we can see this vector of making sure that everybody gets home safe.
Well, that's a great point to move toward questions with. So I would welcome any of you in the audience to come up to the microphone. We'd love to hear from you, and we've got a great panel willing to answer.
Hi there. So we've talked a lot about safety, but what about from the pedestrian perspective? I wonder if there's been any work being done probably at Google or other places in the industry of legislation for how these cars might communicate with the outside world. Right now we have horns and we have lights, but how should an autonomous vehicle communicate with the outside world?
In driving in new neighborhoods, that's one of the things that we love to hear from people. Our vehicles right now do have horns, they have lights, all the regular things that vehicles have, and we do use them. But one of the reasons why we want to hear back from the community is questions like that. How would they like to see vehicles communicate back to them? I will say that in some of the feedback that we've gotten back from folks, let's say here in Austin, it's been really positive. I think, the other day I saw a woman was out jogging, and she wrote that she was impressed that the self-driving car knew to slow down as she approached the intersection. Another gentleman wrote that he parks his big truck on a quite busy street here in Austin, and normally when he goes to open his door, he sort of is walking in front of his truck, and a lot of the traffic doesn't see him because it's a quite big truck. And he was impressed that the self-driving vehicle was able to spot him standing in between his truck and another vehicle. So certainly pedestrians are one of the objects that our vehicle recognizes after having seen hundreds of thousands of different pedestrians of all shapes and sizes.
Additional add-in. This isn't in the plans of all of the folks that are participating in self-driving, including Google. But in one thing, in vehicle to infrastructure or V to X, is that there is the opportunity to have a "Here I Am" beacon in your cell phone, so that you'll be V2P or vehicle to pedestrian, so that you'll actually be able to ping off a signal from your cell phone that I'm a pedestrian in a particular corner, which will also, not only just for the self-driving vehicle, but for regularly driven vehicles, can actually give a warning for pedestrian safety to the driver, or possibly even, maybe depending on how elaborate it is, to give a buzz on a cell phone for somebody to look. As I said before, it's, there's a lot of moving pieces of this technology, but for pedestrian safety especially, and especially as we're pushing bicycling and walking more, how do we sort of improve those vectors? But the nice thing about self-driving vehicle, including Google's program, is that you can actually have a vehicle properly behave in a pedestrian crosswalk. How many of you, when somebody's in a crosswalk, will walk a little further and you go ahead and make that right-hand turn through the crosswalk? While you're not endangering anybody, that's actually illegal. You can't do that. You're supposed to let no pedestrian be in a crosswalk when you execute a turn. The Google car does that. Human beings don't, which is the reason why people are impressed that the Google car does what it does.
Yes, sir, please.
Thank you all very much. My name is Randy Holmgren. I'm a U.S. Congressman from Illinois. Represent the suburbs of Chicago, served at Blake, came in at the same time. So,
Should I be a little weary right now?
It's all good. It's all good. Hey, a couple questions, if I could. One, I serve on the Science-Based and Technology Committee, also on the Financial Services Committee. Insurance goes through the Financial Services Committee. Quickly, we touched on it, but just wondering, with timing, when is the right time? I know there's going to be a congressional hearing this week coming up, but also getting into some of the other impacts like insurance. When is the right time for us, I think, just to start having hearings and becoming aware of it? Would be one question. Is it now? Should we wait a year or two to start diving into this financial services? And then a little different question, just more personally, with the growth of a sharing economy with Uber, how does that impact? I mean, I just had a technology forum in my district back in Illinois where Uber talked about, really their goal of saying, hey, we don't want anybody to have to own a car, we'll do all the driving for you. So how do you see the sharing economy impacting self-driving vehicles?
I can touch on the sharing economy first, and we can get to insurance. I know Lyft and GM have teamed up to start implementing, it's very, I don't know the exact details, but they're looking forward to one day Lyft being fully autonomous, and that would be the sharing economy would then come into it. So I think people are starting to pick up the fact that we could possibly do something more with this. So again, I don't have the exact figure or timeline. Oh, $500 million we're putting to Lyft to help implement this technology. And then, yes, you guys can touch on the insurance.
Well, sure. I mean, just follow up with Sasha on the sharing economy. I think the goal when you're thinking, this is transformational in a lot of aspects, and I think that frankly, the original equipment manufacturers, the OEMs, are thinking about what is a model of vehicle purchasing going to even look like in the future. Will sharing actually become a vector where everybody will be frankly buying, sort of like NetJet shares in vehicles for self-driving, and you don't really actually own a car anymore? I mean, that's lots of questions there, but I think that's an open question, and I think there's a lot of folks, a lot of players that are investing heavily trying to get on top of that curve. In terms of insurance, in terms of when is the time you're really looking at it, I think the time, frankly, is right now, because we're looking at deployments, frankly, well, there's a small level deployment right now. We think about Tesla and autopilot, right? So, I mean, I think the question about financial responsibility, I think, is live. Now, the question if you want more players in is another issue, but this isn't something I think is going to like fallow for a year or two. I think those questions are that and a number of other things probably very wrong.
And I have to agree as well, because the best way I tell startup companies to get really involved at the Hill and kind of make themselves open so we know what's going on is have meetings with us, educate us on the issue before it comes out. Let staffers and individuals and legislators in Congress know what the technology does, where it's going in the next 5 years, where they see it, so then when we do have it rolled out, the Congress is fully aware and they're able to kind of understand the issues more. So earlier hearings, early education of staff is so welcome.
Well, and I will say there is a foundation to be built on, because currently the National Association of Insurance Commissioners is already meeting on this. They've had a working group on it for a little while now. So it's not as though Congress would have to start from scratch. There are lots of experts who are boned up on it already.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mike.
Hi, how are you? So, I had a question about, I was thinking about the fact that there seems to be interest around the world in autonomous vehicles in other countries. So I'm wondering if people on the panel think there may be incentives for the United States to sort of sort out what that regulatory environment might look like that supports autonomous vehicles, because I know personally, as many people in this room do, that if you travel around the world, they make our traffic problems look like nothing, in Africa or Asia or India. And so I'm wondering what you think in terms of world market, potential world market interest in autonomous vehicles is, whether you think it's good or whether you think it's important that there be convergence in the United States on policy about how we are going to continue to develop and regulate autonomous vehicles.
I'll happily start, because I was asked to participate in the formulation of agencies like the one I used to run in a couple of third world countries. That is very much a first world question, because what you're talking about here is a lot of third world economies that are dealing with two-wheel transportation, having 5, 6, 7 people on a motorcycle, getting them to 4 wheels before you get to sort of notions of automation. So I think as we sort of think about vehicle technology, there's definitely going to be a technological divide for a long period of time until we get a number of countries as they're going towards, usage of 4-wheel vehicles. That being said, in terms of the United States actually being able to be regulatory, from a regulatory standpoint, ahead and being a leader in self-driving vehicles, I think that right now, the flexibility of the current system, states not included. I think the federal regulatory flexibility actually enables the United States to be a leader, because as long as your vehicle is compliant with federal motor vehicle safety standards, your vehicle can have technologies well beyond that to do anything. That's the reason why you have lane keeping assist on the road today, crash and brake on the road today with no federal standard. I mean, that's the ultimate flexibility. For us to be able to think about a system going forward to be able to help with deployment, that's what, that frankly Jennifer and Sasha and I were talking about, is that there's a lot of state issues that got to get worked out, for us to be able to actually get full deployment. But I think in terms of a regulatory foundation today, in terms of getting things out on the road from the federal level, I think we're in a pretty good flexible spot for doing that.
My first one question was informed by being inside four-wheel vehicles in traffic in Lagos, Nigeria, and in Bangalore, India, and in Phnom Penh, South Asia.
But the reason why I say, it wasn't majorative, but it really is it's a cost issue. Because if you don't have people that actually, because right now, let's just even get beyond this, not to get too geeky about auto safety, but if you have, I'm not picking on Ford, if you pick a Ford Escape that you for sale in the United States, and you have a Ford Escape for sale in South America, they may look the same, they ain't the same. they would not pass a crash test in the United States. So before we even start thinking about levels of automation and developing economies, we have to frankly even get them to be able to step up to actually increase the margin of safety in their vehicles that are frankly, regular on-road vehicles that are available today.
Anyone else? All right. Yes, sir.
Hi. So far, the story is quite focused on the few companies that are coming up with the tech, but eventually these cars are going to need to be built by other companies, manufacturers. So I was wondering if you could speak a little bit as to the disruption that might happen to manufacturers. Are we likely to see them become more generic, like subcontractors of Google, and I can have 2 Google cars manufactured by 2 different people, or are you more partnering so that, let's say, Mazda come up with their own designs, but it's powered by Google sort of thing?
Yeah, I think sometimes those of us in the tech industry don't recognize how difficult it is to build a car. Cars are very complex machines with a lot of different pieces. So we really feel like Google isn't the manufacturer of cars. We don't have that expertise that a lot of the OEMs have. And so we have said publicly that we're looking to partner with other manufacturers to bring the next generation self-driving car to market.
So the designs would still be there, yes? The design of the car and all this, and with Google Tech kind of integrated into it, or?
I think those details are yet to be worked out.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi. I found it's interesting on your 94% human failure rate is acceptable, but 1% of the machine is not. So it's just interesting the psychology of humans around that, saying it's okay for humans to fail, but not machines. My question is, I was listening to a presentation about self-driving vehicles from a really smart guy. I can't tell you his name, I don't remember. But he was saying that currently there are autonomous trucks in Germany running all the time. And so my question is twofold. From a full circle perspective, when do you think it will be impossible to buy a human driving vehicle? He was saying by 2025 you will not be able to drive your vehicle, will be illegal to drive a vehicle. And then secondly, from a legislative standpoint, why don't we just cut and paste what the Germans are doing, to speed things up?
Honestly, I think we're going to have cars that humans can drive for the next 50 to 75 years. I do not see them rolling fully autonomous anytime soon. 20 years is a short timeline. It's shorter than, we think 20 years is a while, 20 years is like super quick. And then regarding cutting German legislation, state legislation, it would be fun, but we've got a lot of members of Congress to get along and a president as well. So we could look at it. And it has been done where foreign legislation is looked at, and then Americans will modify off it to find a way that we can kind of accommodate for other nation states and ourselves as well. So that would be an option, but not a cutting and pasting, although it would be fun.
Great observation. German trucks platoon, and they're on the Autobahn, which is a very controlled environment, which is much more simplistic. They don't actually sort of run through, cities, boulevards, neighborhoods. So that makes it simple. Second, the reason why the Germans are able to execute things like that because they don't have states that have regulatory police authority over vehicle safety. We do. So the reason why the Germans have a national driver's license and the reasons why the Germans have a national safety recall system is because of those very same things. So we would have to have a pretty major upheaval in how we do things for us to be able to sort of match what the Germans do from a legislative and regulatory standpoint. But it was a really good observation.
Hey, so I know you guys talked about requiring a licensed driver in the car at all times, at least right now. Do you guys see a time when that wouldn't be necessary? Because I can think of scenarios where I want to say, hey, car, drive me to the Marriott and then go park yourself, for example. So in that case, you possibly wouldn't have a human in the car. So do you think that's coming anytime soon, or?
Well, it depends how successful Jennifer is in California. What do you think, Jennifer?
Well, again, we have the goal of a fully self-driving car that can take anyone from point A to point B and push of a button, right? That means that the human does not have any need to interact with the car. That's a fully L4 as David described it. So, we are looking for we appreciate that the federal government actually has acknowledged that a driver can be a self-driving system, and I think that's an important first step.
Got it. Okay.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
So a lot of reports out there talk about benefits of autonomous driving around the 1 to 2 trillions, and approximately half of that is speculated to come through increase in productivity for society. Through gaining time, being able to do something else when you're stuck in traffic. And I'd love to hear the panel elaborate on that a bit more and to see how that could potentially drive change as well.
Yeah, I mean, I've read all of those studies as well, and I think there's a lot of great work out there about what are some of the other benefits of self-driving technology. And we do hear that from people as well in the feedback that we get from communities. We hear from them how they want to use it. Whether it's, as the other gentleman gave an example of sending the car to go park itself outside of the city center, or whether it's so that they can use their time commuting more efficiently. Those are all types of things that we've also heard.
I mean, it could potentially change how people live, right? I mean, you could live further away from work and so forth. So I see it being a big shift. I'm just not hearing those things, but I guess we're talking about the capability being fixed first.
Yes.
Thank you.
So this may be more of a long-term question, but thinking through all the fights that we've had between the taxi companies and Uber and Lyft of the world, I see this being a huge disruptor for taxi drivers and even long-haul drivers. And I did some quick Googling, there's something like 2 million long-haul drivers and taxi drivers combined. This will be a huge disruption. So we can assume that there will be a massive fight when, let's say, Walmart wants to automate their fleet, or automate their fleet. What do you see, what are the steps that can be taken now to mitigate the damage that would cause, or the disruption that would cause, and how do we start working through those problems now so that there's not a huge fight that dramatically displaces drivers?
Well, like was mentioned earlier hearings, meetings with legislators to talk about what's coming down in the future, what could possibly this technology possibly do. And for example, my Congress represents Corpus Christi, and Uber is now pretty much being banned from the city because the taxi cab company got very, very upset. And that could have been avoided in so many ways at the local level, not obviously on our level, but smaller to explain what Uber is, how it could benefit the economy, how it's helpful. And I just think it was short-sighted sometimes. And a lot of companies sometimes do is not realize they just need to get in the offices of those who write legislation and help out. Because if you get in, you explain what's going on, and you make people comfortable with it, it's a very smooth process of transition forward.
I think Sasha's right, and I think we also need to recognize that as technology has developed over hundreds of years, types of jobs have changed and new jobs are developed. So I don't think it's so black and white.
I would say, read your history books, when the invention of the car happened, all of the livery companies that took care of horses and carriages were completely in a pitched fight about the horseless carriage. We've seen this time and time again. You're right, it's politically difficult, but every time that we've had sort of a disruptive technological evolution, that we find new opportunities from those that disappeared, because of the disruption. So it'll be the same story, different take, but yeah, it won't be easy, and it will be politically difficult.
Thank you, and I apologize to the remaining folks with questions. I've been given the signal. Happy to talk to you afterwards. Let's thank our panelists. This has been just great. And thank you, Southwest.